Okay, I think we're going to get started in the interest of time and to respect everyone who's already online. We've got 86 participants and the list is growing. Bonjour, buenos dias, good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining from in the world, and welcome to our webinar on youth engagement and leadership in sport and development. Really great to have everyone online and joining this webinar. We've got a really exciting panel lined up today. My name is Ben Sanders. I'm a senior consultant at the International Platform on Sport and Development, sportanddev, sportanddev.org. You may know our website well, and we're really proud to be bringing you this webinar in partnership with the Commonwealth Secretariat, amplifying the voices of young people using sport for development and peace. I will be co-moderating this webinar with my colleague Mishrah Schlenker, who I'll introduce shortly. This webinar builds upon a call for articles on youth leadership and engagement in sport for development and peace that we launched almost a month ago, asking for contributions from the global sport and development community. This is in the lead up to International Youth Day, which is tomorrow on the 12th of August. And so today we are holding a webinar on the importance of young leaders using sport and their specific projects to build back better. We know that sport and development and many other aspects of our lives have been profoundly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And these have affected the ways in which young people can engage meaningfully and safely. So we see a really urgent need here to share tools, resources, and best practices, which organizations and individuals, including young people themselves, can use to empower youth during a time in which they're often increasingly vulnerable and disconnected. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I see we've got people from all over the world, from South America, from Africa, from Australia, from Europe, and many other parts of the world. It's fantastic to have you all here. Many of our partners I see online already. And we'd really like to dedicate this webinar today to all the young people across continents, across cultures, across contexts that are working tirelessly every day, often with little reward, but using sport to empower themselves and others. These are community leaders, coaches, peer mentors, and they're the true heroes, I think, of this time and deserve our recognition for being on the front lines. So this workshop brings together 3 inspiring young people from 3 different youth networks and backgrounds who will discuss today how young people are and continue to lead the sport for development peace sector and building back better. We encourage you to share your comments in the chat, to ask questions. We will try and make this webinar as interactive as possible. And so we really value your engagement. Hopefully we will have some time for questions at the end as well. So thank you so much for joining us on behalf of Sport and Dev. I will now hand over to my co-host, Mishrah, who will set some ground rules for the discussion and lead us forward. Over to you, Mishrah.
Thank you, Ben, and welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you all here. This is so cool to read where people are calling in from, the different organizations, different projects, and feel free, as Ben said, to continue to use the chat throughout the 1-hour webinar. So as Ben said, I'm co-hosting this with Ben today. My name is Mishrah Schlenker, and I'm a consultant in sport and development. I work with the Unicef Sport Hub and also support the International Platform on Sport for Development. Of course, before we go any further, we do have to cover some basic housekeeping rules. I think it seems that everybody knows many of these because everybody has their microphones on mute. So that is also obviously what we would ask so that we can hear from our speakers. So thank you for that. An important thing is that we are recording this. And if you do not wish to be recorded, then we would just ask you kindly to leave, or you can also turn off your video. The third thing, as Ben mentioned, this chat. So we will be doing a Q&A towards the end of the session today. And so please, and also when you do put in a question, make sure you can say whom you would like to answer this question. So if it's specific to one of the speakers, that would help us. And then last, which is definitely very, very important, is that in this space, we do not tolerate any discrimination. We have to be careful on what we say because we want this to be a safe virtual space. So no hate speech or discrimination will be tolerated. And I think with those housekeeping rules, we're good to go. Before we introduce the panelists, we are delighted to begin with a brief message from Saurabh Mishrah, the Sport for Development and Peace Project Officer at the Commonwealth Secretariat, and one of the founding partners of the Sport for Sustainable Development MOOC. So Saurabh, I'll hand it over to you to give a short, a couple of words.
Thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Ben, for that introduction. And thank you to all of the participants for joining us today with this webinar. Really glad to be here representing the Commonwealth Secretariat, and I'll try to keep my remarks as short as possible because I'm really looking forward to this excellent panel that we've put together today. I think at this point, we've been on a few of these webinars now, and I think the impact of COVID-19 is something that we've heard about a lot and something that we've become very familiar with, both in terms of the magnitude of socioeconomic impact at the global level and how there are very few lives that I think remain untouched by the pandemic. And honestly, this includes the sport for development sector. For all of us young people, I think it's fair to say that this is the most disruptive singular event of our generation. It has impacted us disproportionately when we look at physical and mental health and well-being, job losses, barriers to continued education. And the picture becomes even more concerning when we actually cut across that available data and information to actually look at the impact on young women and girls and young people with disabilities, for instance. However, many sport organizations, athletes, and young people in sport also responded really positively with immediate cooperation to help with facility closures or other public health measures, or whether it be volunteering in emergency centers and to spread preventative health messaging. At the same time, the pandemic, of course, intersected with worldwide movements centered on preventing abuse, discrimination, and racism. And young people once again had an important role to play here as well, both in sport and through sport, I would say, on a larger scale. Right now, I think almost 2 years on, we're talking about building back better, but honestly, we cannot do that unless and until we place those who need the rebuild the most at the very center of that rebuild. Disruption brings opportunity, and right now there is an opportunity to really empower young people to actually participate in the decision-making process. And this is not just limited to the sport for development sector, but broadly looking at how young people can contribute to the rebuild through sport. But from our perspective, and this is me speaking as the Commonwealth, which is of course an intergovernmental body that has a prominent role to play when it comes to policy development across 54 member countries. From our perspective, it cannot just be a case of having young people around the table. Of course, that is important, but empowerment means more than just representation. It requires capacity building. It needs access to the actual policy processes. And above all, it needs for the needs of young people to be mainstreamed across all policies and programs on an ongoing basis. So it cannot be a one-off in the sense that young people are not suddenly important because we need to rebuild from COVID-19 or because they've been impacted by COVID-19. Young people have always been important, but it's perhaps one demographic that has not had the voice that it deserved when it actually comes to the actual decision-making processes. So as more and more organizations call for youth mainstreaming, including us at the Commonwealth, I am hopeful that young people will have their opportunity to participate in decision-making, but we need to be ready as young people as well. We need to take advantage of the resources and tools out there to make sure we can be willing as well as well-informed advocates and practitioners for the use of sport for development. In fact, I'm really glad to see the international platform. I'm really glad to be partnering with the international platform on sport and development here, because this is something in mind, something that we had in mind throughout the past couple of years when we worked with the Australian government and the international platform to create a free online course on using sport for development through well-designed targeted policies and programs aligned to prioritize sustainable development goals. The courses were kept free of cost, keeping in mind access to young people, keeping in mind the fact that there were a number of tools and resources which were perhaps just not as accessible as they need to be. As we look at the post-pandemic environment for the sector, not just for the sport for development sector, but broadly for the sports sector, we're looking at increased ICT usage, increased instances of use of remote technology for program delivery, and this is where the young people can really shine. But as I said, we need to be ready. We need to basically make sure that we are at the center of that. We're playing as active a role as possible, and that will require our own capacity building as well, in addition to asking for that access. So I'm really hopeful that today's discussion will bring us some really useful recommendations in that regard as to what role have young people played so far, but also looking prospectively, what does the role of young people need to be when it actually comes to this sector, and when it actually comes to contributing to the rebuild of not just this sector, but contributing to the larger rebuild by using this sector, by playing an active role in this sector. With that, I wish all the panelists the best, and I'm once again thank all of the participants on this webinar today, and look forward to a really fruitful period of discussion. Back to you, Marisa and Ben.
Great, thank you so much, Saurabh, for that eloquent introduction and opening remarks. Once again, on behalf of Sport and Dev, we're really grateful for the support and our long-standing partnership with the Commonwealth Secretariat, who've done a lot of pioneering work in the sport for development field, including in supporting young people in leadership and engagement in this space. I'll now introduce our three panelists, and we've got a great lineup for you today. Three young leaders from different parts of the world. First of all, we have Miss Tanya Lee, who is an IOC International Olympic Committee young leader and sports dietitian. Tanya is a sports dietitian and an ex-swimmer with a passion towards the development and well-being of athletes. Earlier this year, she was selected as one of the 25 new IOC young leaders representing Malaysia. She is also the co-founder of the Malaysian Olympism and Action Society, which aims to create an ecosystem that supports an inclusive and sustainable empowerment program for people in sports to become great leaders. Welcome, Tanya. Great to have you here with us today.
Thanks, Ben. It's great to be here.
Secondly, we have Mr. Jack Needham. He is a Europe focal point for the Commonwealth Youth Sport for Development and Peace, CYDSP network. Jack holds a Master's in Sport Management from Loughborough University, and he supports the Sport for Development and Peace sector in varying capacities, including a long-standing role supporting Sport and Dev, and to provide project expertise. And we are very grateful to Jack for all of his support over the years. He also supports academics at Loughborough University with research on organizational relationships in sport and development, and most recently has taken up the role of Europe focal point for the CYDSP network. Welcome, Jack. Great to have you with us here today.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Looking forward to today.
And finally, last but not least, we have Miss Shante Johannes, who, like myself, hails from South Africa. She is a youth leader at the Foundation for Sport and Development and Peace, FSDP, a valued partner of Sport and Dev and steering board member. Chante is an associate lecturer in the Sport, Recreation and Exercise Science Department at the University of the Western Cape in South Africa. She is also a youth leader at the Foundation of Sport and Development and Peace, an organization that's committed to advocating for Olympic values as tools for development and peace. Welcome, Chante. Great to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone.
Great. So that's our three panelists hailing from different parts of the world, different backgrounds, and we're going to move into a Q&A with them. As we said, if you have any questions for them specifically, feel free to pop those in the chat and addressing them to one of the panelists or all, if relevant, and we'll try to get to those throughout the webinar or at the end. So just to kick off, firstly, could each of you just tell us, just in 2 minutes, a little bit about your organization and your involvement in sport and development? If you could kick off, Chante, followed by Jack and Tanya. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Ben, and good afternoon, everyone. Like Ben mentioned, my name is Shante Johannes. I am a youth leader for the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace. I've been there since 2016. We are a non-profit organization that promotes the universal Olympic values. Within the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace, we have another branch called the Youth Network. And this branch developed in 2018 and consists of a cohort of determined, driven, and aspiring young professionals in the field of sport development and peace. This platform ultimately uses sport as a vehicle for skills and career development, volunteering opportunities, networking, and most importantly, collaboration. This, we hope, provides a space for youth to be able to voice their opinions, their experiences, be of service to their communities through sports and recreation initiatives, as well as gain experience from other sports professionals and mentors such as ourselves in the youth network. So that is just a brief summary of our youth network from the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace.
Great, thank you, Chante. Over to Jack.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Shante. And I'll take a quick 10 seconds just to say thank you, Ben, Marissa, Saurabh, for organising today. It's great to be asked to join as a speaker alongside Tanya and Chante as well. So looking forward to today's insights and discussions. So today I'm here representing the Commonwealth Youth Sport for Development and Peace Network, CYDSP for short. I sit on the exec committee with the role of Europe Regional Focal Point, meaning that I have responsibility for the nations within the Commonwealth in Europe. So those are Malta, Cyprus and the UK. So the CYDSP was established in 2013. It's part of the Commonwealth Secretariat's youth programme and that division of work. And the network holds three kind of key strategic aims: to advocate, to educate and to demonstrate. And of course, all of this is in relation to sport and development. We advocate the importance of engaging youth and inviting youth to a seat at the table, such as me being at this event today. But we also work in developing educational materials, for example, and supporting training sessions. And I think, my personal involvement in sport and development very much started after leaving university, which I do regret, because Loughborough University had some great opportunities that at the time I wasn't involved in. But since then I've supported several organisations in a range of roles, but primarily kind of in the back office, working as a facilitator and an administrator. For example, recently helping Loughborough University London as a research assistant. That was a study funded by the Olympic Studies Centre as well. And then with Sport and Dev providing hands-on experience with project management. We've done a little bit of bid writing, marketing, and just anything that requires a bit of support. And then most recently, my role with CYDSP in advocacy as well, and the Europe Regional Focal Point. So a couple hats in my roles, but yeah, really happy to be here today and looking forward to the discussion. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Jack. We're really happy to have you here as well. Over to you, Tanya.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I'm really excited and happy to be here. As what Ben has mentioned, I'm the co-founder of the Malaysian Olympism in Action Society. And this society, basically, we were founded by a group of very passionate sport leaders in various fields. Most of us were alumni members of the Malaysian National Olympic Academy, where we were introduced to the principles of Olympism, where it is a philosophy of life based on values of excellence, respect, and friendship. And we all strongly believe that we can use the power of sport to make the world a better place. So in our society, we organize many programs and activities based on these principles. And our aim is really to nurture leaders, sports leaders, to promote active and healthy lifestyle based on participating, joy of effort, and really also, while doing that, we aim to also promote social responsibility and respect in the society to these young leaders. So as a IOC Young Leader, the IOC Young Leaders program is really very much in line with my personal values and objectives of my society So hopefully I can be able to further enhance my initiative to create this ecosystem in Malaysia, which is inclusive and sustainable, to empower these young leaders, so we can have more sport leaders from various sport backgrounds, physical abilities, from different races, ethnicity, and inclusive to, you know, both genders. Yeah, so basically that's just a short brief summary, but yeah, I hope to share more and hear more from Chante and also Jack. Yeah, it's really a great pleasure being here.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Tanya, and thanks, Jack. Thanks, Chante. It's great to have all of you here. The work you guys are all doing is really inspiring. A great example of youth leadership in the space, with tangible outcomes and rewards. So do feel free to share any links to the work you're doing or the networks you're a part of in the chat, as I'm sure many of the audience members would be interested in that. So our next question to the panelists is really centered around the pandemic, which has, you know, had a huge impact on all of our lives, as Saurabh has illustrated and pointed out. We know it's had a pronounced effect on young people, and we know it's had an even more pronounced effect on young people in developing countries. So could you please elaborate on how COVID-19 has affected and continues to affect your work, and what your response has been? You know, what solutions have you found during these times to address some of the challenges, to adapt and move forward with your projects? Obviously, there are both challenges and opportunities in this regard. So I'll hand it actually straight back to you, Tanya, and then followed by Jack and Chante. Thanks.
All right, sure. So with the COVID in Malaysia, unfortunately, we have several lockdowns, which means that we are not allowed to organize any activities that requires physical contact. And because of the movement restriction, we did have many programs planned this year where we involve school-going children in schools, as well as some of the athletes. So we had to adapt, and of course we have to switch our program to become virtual and of course more accessible to students. One of the examples I would say would be this program called My Spotlight, where we have programs for primary school children, where we encourage them to promote sport, right, in their own way, because they were not able to practice sport at all at home, not as much, and also we were not able to interact much with them. So instead we encourage them to promote their interests, their sport, their role models. So in this way, we would also be able to get to know them, the young children, soon to be youth, right? And also know what they're thinking, who their role models are. And of course, we have other activities as well, such as the Race for Olympism, where it was supposed to be an actual run, but instead we had to move it to become a virtual run because of the lockdown. But it was a blessing in disguise, because we were not allowed to go out in groups, but we were able to individually exercise, which means our event actually motivated people to stay active during the lockdown. And they were very competitive. And for those who hadn't actually started running at all previously, they were competitive because they wanted to collect miles. So it was a great success. And I think sometimes we just have to be creative in our approach in terms of when it comes to projects. But definitely, I mean, the COVID affected us, but of course, yeah, we adapted.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thanks, Tanya. And I think, yeah, being innovative and creative, it's amazing what one can do even in a virtual space. And the fact that you sort of stimulated the growth in physical activity, which we know is a huge predictor of health, and both physical and mental, is great. So well done. Jack, I'll hand over to you now to provide some insights from your side.
Yeah, so I think I think it's clear that COVID-19 has had an impact on everyone. I think the degree to which it impacts on our work partly depends on the roles we hold and the model of working that we had going into it. So I think, you know, my role with Sport and Dev, for example, over the last 2.5 years, Ben's in South Africa, Paul's in Switzerland, you know, remote working and video calls were very much part of the norm already. So, you know, we just carried on the same way. And it's the same for the CYDSP network. You know, we've got a global team, you know, representatives all over the world in different countries, and video calls are very much the norm. But it doesn't mean we weren't impacted by COVID. You know, the entire world slowed down. There was so much uncertainty around the immediate future, not alone kind of the next 3 to 5 years as well. So plans were delayed and postponed. But I think the point is that, you know, that whilst there was less of an adjustment and a learning curve to that remote working model, you know, in some cases it's had a big impact on people. You know, my 9 to 5 kind of day job, for example, was the epitome of, you know, office working. Every meeting was in person. Everything was done on paper, and it took months to adjust for the entire organization to get to the same point where everyone's got the same kind of level of confidence or even digital literacy as well. So the comfort in using new technology and you know, changing processes so that they're digital versus kind of manual paperwork, for example. But I think, you know, speaking to some of my colleagues in the network, you'll get a completely different answer to mine based on the roles that we hold and what life was like going into the pandemic. My colleague, Robert, who is the African regional focal point, he told me as an implementer and a deliverer of a tennis program that they had no access to facilities for about 6 months, which ultimately meant, you know, fewer interactions with the children on the program, reduced events, reduced tournaments, and an almost total stop to the delivery of tennis in the community and to the participants. But essentially, you know, they found ways to overcome this. Socially distanced meetups, which became very common. They began wearing masks at training sessions, which meant that they could actually perform the physical activity. But they also repurposed some of the program time. So, you know, they started hosting regular talks about the importance of hygiene, which, you know, was key to focusing on the issue at hand and using what was an already engaged group and kind of really reiterating key messages to them. And, you know, they also spent the time providing support to those in need, so food parcels, materials, things like that. And I think, you know, some of these kind of key words have already been mentioned, but, you know, it takes creativity to adapt, and sometimes it takes a bit of a challenge. So learning new skills, challenges with technologies, things like that. But, you know, we all know technology, the uptake has been enormous during the pandemic, as has the creation of technology or repurposing of it. So, you know, things like Zoom, Teams, Skype, whatever it is, they were primarily used for businesses, for meetings, but then they were used for kind of remote delivery of programs. WhatsApp started being used for educational purposes, so document sharing, things like that. But I think, you know, the key thing, in addition to the creativity, is, you know, patience and working collaboratively. You know, it either meant identifying solutions to the challenges or working with others to do it. And then, you know, once you've got something, sharing it with others that may need it and finding the gap there. But equally, you know, you may not have to come up with the idea yourself, but keep an eye out for ideas that are working elsewhere and try and reapply them. So I think all those things have really helped with overcoming the challenges over the last, you know, 15 to 18 months. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Jack. Yeah, some really great points, really. And then some great examples where organizations have pivoted their work to be part of the frontline response, relief and recovery efforts. And we've shared a link in the chat to some resources on Sport and Dev, and the Commonwealth has done a lot of work in this. There's a Commonwealth Moves program, which contains a whole set of resources where organizations have adapted them to be digital friendly so they can be done online. And so we've seen a lot of really important work being done in this regard so that these programs are still accessible for young people who need them more than ever. Chante, I'll hand over to you to provide your thoughts on how this has affected your work.
Thank you so much, Ben. So every year, the Foundation for Sport Development and Peace hosts a International Sport Development and Peace Conference in September. And during this conference, we have a Youth Heritage Games, where we invite various youth participants and groups to learn about their culture in the form of an amazing race. But due to COVID restrictions and lockdowns, we were unable to host the youth heritage games. Also, we had a boot camp being arranged for last year, but that as well had to be postponed until further notice. And we realized that we are unable to host large gatherings of youth participants, especially in close contact with one another and in small areas. So we decided, okay, how can we adapt and be innovative? So we decided to make use of our open air and being outside, especially in Cape Town where there's a lot of beaches and a lot of mountains. We decided to use that to our advantage. So even though we had restrictions, the youth network continued to collaborate with small groups of youth while adhering to COVID protocols, such as the South African gymnastics rope skipping team, as well as primary schools based in Cape Town. And we've adapted our youth initiatives to suit the COVID-19 protocols, and therefore many projects were hosted, like I said, in the open air spaces. During last year, we engaged in various initiatives, and like Jack said, sometimes it's best to jump onto other initiatives that maybe have been done somewhere else and see how you can do it where you are. And so we made use of that, but not only in sport initiatives, but in environmental and social initiatives as well. So such as the Unicef Move for Change, where the youth network participated in a 5-kilometer run on the beaches. So open air, not in close contact with one another. I mean, everybody was running at their own pace. So we done that. And then we done a Reconciliation Day hike on Lion's Head, as well as we celebrated World Leisure Day by promoting awareness about leisure time for the South African gymnastics rope skipping team. We had a little lecture about that, maintaining social distancing, and especially during COVID, how you can still keep up with your leisure time, even though you might be restricted to just your home or your room or wherever you are. And then we decided to incorporate environmental challenges as well. So we celebrated World Oceans Day, where the youth were invited to participate in a plogging event. So for those that don't know, plogging is a new term that has come to surface. And plogging relates to, or is combined with plastic and jogging. So when you put the two together, it creates plogging. And so we tried to pick up trash on the beaches in a physical manner, whether you are walking or jogging. We're still trying to advocate for combining environmental and physical issues. And then we had a self-defense initiative through the use of karate for Youth Day, so that we are able to raise awareness amongst primary school learners about gender-based violence and how they can protect themselves and their loved ones. So we started with small groups, and hopefully we can move to larger groups once the pandemic is over. So we haven't slacked down on our initiatives, but rather we've, like Tanya said, we've adapted and been innovative in the methods that we've used. So yeah, thanks, Ben.
Great, thanks. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to my co-host, Marissa.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Ben, and thank you to all of our panelists for offering such great practical examples. I think that that's really helpful. And I would continue to say in the chat, if you have any questions that you would like to answer about any of the organizations or networks or anything that they've mentioned, please feel free to write in the chat. But I'll use this time now to ask another question. So we've heard adaptation, we've heard creativity, we've heard innovation from you all just in the short amount of time that we've been here together. And so let's kind of take a forward and a future-looking question, because we've also heard about you, we've heard about the work that you're doing, and also how COVID implications have influenced your work. So let's look in the future of your projects, and I'd like to ask you all just to share kind of what do you see as we rebuild and reimagine in this space of sport for development? How do you view the future of your work? So you can comment on some of your projects that you're working on or the networks that you're a part of. And then in that, so when you think about the future of your work and of course, thinking about the current situation, what are the different challenges and opportunities that you think that are part of this process? So yeah, so really think now about just kind of where you want to go with some of your projects, and then thinking what different challenges and opportunities can come with that. And this time I'll ask Jack if you'll go first and kind of share some of your insight there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mishrah. So I think, I answered in the last question that I think some of my personal areas of work will remain unchanged in terms of, I guess, the how. So, how we will continue to have, virtual remote calls, but, it's based on the role that I hold, and it will remain the same for CYDSP with those remote meetings that we have, and we'll continue to collaborate remotely as well. But I think what we will do, or what we will focus on, will take a bit of a shift and refocus following, the events over the last 18 months. I think a key one there is, as we're doing now, advocacy. So attendance at events. Previously, I think, conferences and meetings and things like that used to take place in person, and there was a lot of overheads there in terms of time and cost, based all over the world, but that actually makes them quite exclusive. And there's also a kind of a contradictory question around the climate impact of the time it takes to set up these events and also travel to them, obviously. And I think, if anything, the last 12 months, there've been so many smaller, really valuable webinars such as this one that are just manageable. They're online, easily accessible, free to access, another key aspect there. And they don't take up the entire week or day. You can quite quickly jump into them or watch the recording afterwards if you're not able to make the whole thing. So I think there'll be a shift with that. But to be honest, it could go either way, because if you're not in person at events, you do miss out on some networking opportunities. You miss out on those kind of casual corridor chats, or the water cooler chats where you can come up with this amazing idea together and start discussing things like that. So, it could go either way. Speaking to some of my colleagues in CYDSP network, they also believe similar, there could be a greater focus on certain development areas moving forwards, based on things that have happened over the last 18 months, current events. Essentially, we've got things like Black Lives Matter, Pride, gender-based violence, which has also already been discussed, and also the climate impact as well. And then obviously there's some existing focus areas that have probably most likely been kind of exacerbated and further worsened following the pandemic. So mental health being a key one, economic deprivation as well. So I think the focus may shift more towards those. And there's also a point to be raised, I think, around sport and development's role in global events. So, there's a lot being done here already. There's some great stuff coming up with regards to Olympics in Paris and Impact 2024, which is a great idea, great platform. But, it'd be great to see some more of that. As always, the more the better, but it'd be good to see it kind of outside of the Olympic bubble and maybe in some kind of World Cup events as well. In terms of challenges, opportunities, there's always a few persistent ones. Funding, it's always going to be a challenge, potentially more so now. Unfortunately, some the UK government, as an example, have reduced their commitment to spending on development activities. And also, I think, to kind of lead on from that, there's going to be challenges with the competition for funding. So there's less money in the pot, there's more people that need the money. Everyone's got a great idea, everyone's got a community that needs support, but they're going to be lacking resources. So there's going to be more competition there. And I think, in terms of the opportunities to counter that, I've already spoken a lot about technology and the usage there, but, I think it's evidence that the importance that people now see in the use of technology. This year's kind of the 5th annual debate, Commonwealth debate, was on the use of technology. And, I'd advise anyone to watch the recording on that. And there's also an article that was written by my colleagues, Alvin and Adiola, on that as well. So the youth perspective of the debate. But I think alongside technology, another key one is partnerships, opportunities there. And I think actually there's an opportunity for funders to really overcome the previous two challenges I mentioned. So competition for funding and the availability of funding. It'd be great to see a fund or a grant pot where there is a mandatory requirement that it is co-applied. So you are doing it as a partnership, using each other's strengths. And I think that would help overcome some of those challenges. And then just quickly, I think, in relation to that last question, so, how can young leaders continue to contribute? I think it really is as simple as that. So just continue. There's no reason why young leaders can't be involved in the full life cycle and kind of the supply chain and sport and development, funding, facilitation, delivery, and so on. The key thing is that things don't change overnight. It takes a bit of time, takes patience to see the value in the change. So we just need to continue doing what we're doing, continue identifying the needs in the communities and designing solutions, continue supporting those who are actually doing that. So continue supporting the delivery of programs. And then, as we're doing today, advocacy. So, if that's locally, advocating for local programs and the impact they're having in communities, or internationally, as we are right now across the globe, advocating that youth have skills and experience that are relevant. They've got lived experiences that are relevant and need to be considered as well. And by doing that, continuing to do that, I think that the recognition will continue. The impact being made by youth will be recognised. And through that, more opportunities will open up essentially, and we'll get a good kind of positive feedback loop essentially. So yeah.
Thank you, Jack, and also thank you for adding on about what other young sport leaders like you and Chante and Tanya can do in building back and thinking about these opportunities and challenges. So let's go to Chante next. I'd love to hear your response to this multi-leveled question.
Thank you, Marissa. So the future of the Youth Network will be aimed at reaching a larger amount of youth, especially through collaboration and network. And being involved in this webinar is definitely a start. I think some of my Youth Network friends are in here as well, so we can definitely learn and grow from this and see how we can move forward. But I think especially for the youth, the future youth, it starts with mentoring, and we know that youth are always looking up to role models. They're looking for people to look up to, and so being part of this youth network, we are put into that mentoring role, where we would like the youth to become leaders of their communities and be the mentors that can encourage future adolescents and youth to use sport as a tool for development in the community. And so I think if we continue to advocate for change through sport, then younger crowds are able to see the value of sport and recreation in their daily lives. And like I said, we'll be able to mentor future youth as well. And if we continue to strive to promote the universal Olympic values, where sport can be used as a platform to combat unemployment by creating job opportunities or everlasting skills, knowledge, and solutions to social dilemmas within communities that youth are particularly prone to, such as alcohol and drug abuse, especially during COVID, because now that there are restrictions on walking to the park or going to facilities where you can practice sport, those are challenges that we need to really face and deal with and find solutions through sport of how we can improve those. And so I think youth play a fundamental role in advocating for change within their communities. And therefore, I hope that our youth network can cultivate young leaders who are determined to make a change in their community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You're the one providing all the lived experience and the insight. So thank you for that, for your response. And then we'll move on to Tanya with the same question.
Thank you, Marissa. So in my organization, we organize a lot of programs that involve young athletes or youth athletes. And we were just founded last year in November. So we are taking big baby steps to organize all these programs. Hopefully we are able to nurture more of these young leaders. And I believe that for many organizations out there, whatever that we plan from the past year and maybe even until next year, we always need to have our expected plan and also a backup plan, because we never know when, situations might get worse again and we might need a backup plan. It's much better than canceling the program or postponing it. And I strongly believe that athletes make very excellent sport leaders because, you know, of the background, the different challenges and environment that each athlete has gone through to overcome, making them stronger and making them greater influences or even change makers to tackle this social problem. So, I mean, youth are really, really bridging the gap between the previous generation and as well as the even younger generation. And one example is that I was given the opportunity and confidence to be a leader in my 20s when I participated in the National Olympic Academy. And I mean, I may be the oldest youth for the IOC Young Leader, but that opportunity that I had in my 20s really gave me the exposure during my youth and a lot of great mentorship to build my leadership capabilities. So in Malaysia, I believe that all Malaysian youth really, we have the power to bring new ideas to the table, especially in the sports or management or organization level. And I think that youth should also be given the opportunity and confidence to be heard because although we are young, but I believe that we also have a lot of ideas and different new things that we I guess different environment that exposes us to have different ideas. Yeah, and we might have different influence outcomes, but we just need to have that opportunity given. And in terms of challenges, I believe that youth as a whole, we need to grab any and every opportunity that we have, because like, for example, this webinar, it's available out there, it's free, you know, they just have to take this opportunity to spend 1 hour to listen, and they don't even need to maybe look at the webinar, but, you know, it can be, you know, even the podcast, you know, you can just, you know, just take any opportunity that they have to enhance their skills and also build new ideas, and of course, be confident in whatever plans or ideas that they have. And I think in Malaysia, we do have a lot of webinars that are going on, hopefully not giving them too much of webinar fatigue, but I think these are great opportunities for all the young, the youth, the athletes, yeah, to really enhance their skills. Yeah, we may not be able to, I mean, for us, we may not be able to build future for them, but we can build this youth, you know, for definitely a better future. Yeah, so I think, yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you, Tanya. I hope that people are also watching you all, but yes, I totally agree. It's just the knowledge that you can acquire from so many of these different webinars. And of course, when you're looking to hear from different speakers from different backgrounds, there's so much out there, and it's a matter of finding it and probably managing it. So thank you for those. I'm going now, I see in the chat, and feel free also to the panelists if there's any of the questions that you would like to respond to directly. But I have seen that there's some, what I'm seeing and what we're finding is that there's specific to kind of hosting events and dealing with the different COVID regulations. And then there's some that are coming in about athletes. But I'm going to start with the one that I would like to, because it really kind of leads off of what you all were just speaking about. And I'll say it, and then I'd ask, Jack, if you'd like to first respond, and I'll read the question now. So in addressing gender inequality, many organizations have taken the route of enforcing quotas of women in leadership structures, with the example given International Gymnastics Federation. Do you think similar measures should be put in place to enforce the recognition of youth leadership? If not, how can we get structures to take youth development and creating opportunities for youth seriously? So maybe Jack, if you wanted to take the first go at this one, and of course you can also read it in the chat.
Yeah, sure. No, and it, you know, great question, very relevant, and I think you know, with some of these concepts, we can apply them elsewhere. So, you know, I actually, when I was at university, did a study based on gender in sport, and I think my perspective would be that I think the model that works is to have youth boards and youth committees rather than having them applied at the kind of the top level. And I think part of the question there is, do you think similar measures should be put in place? I think that is a measure. So the advocacy for youth boards and the value that they provide in isolation is a great start, and that also means that obviously you can focus on things like having gender equality on that youth board and diversity on that board as well, and it can in itself act as a very good proof of concept and a means to show the value of gender equality on boards or diversity on boards, and then that hopefully kind of looks at a bottom-up approach. I think the other part looking at that is, if not, how can we get structures to take youth development and creating opportunities seriously? It comes back to this advocacy point, evidencing the value. So where is it done at the moment? Well, so the three of us today are part of organizations that really value youth and clearly invest time and effort into it, and that's a key thing as well, is not doing these things just symbolically as a kind of a token gesture, but really investing time, effort, infrastructure into having a youth committee or a youth board, and then taking the time to advocate for them to your senior management in the organization or others that aren't on there, or even globally within forums that you're in as well. So I think it is key, and I think there's a role to play for the IOC Young Leaders Program. There's ENGZO Youth as well, and CYDSP and others as well. There's a role to play in reiterating the point that we do this for a reason, there's value in it, you should also do it, to other organizations that aren't yet doing it, almost kind of a gap analysis kind of thing, evidencing the value. So I think it's key. I think it's really important to do it.
Thank you, Jack. I'm going to ask one more question, and Chante, I'm going to give this one to you because you mentioned how your organization and your network, you've been adapting to the different changing COVID regulations, but how do you see, so just within 1 minute, because a lot of people are interested in if you could give some tips or any kind of guidelines, so specifically how you've been able to kind of adapt and make sure that you continue to offer your programs and projects by also being in line with all the changing COVID regulations. So could you kind of share again, I mean, you already said it, but kind of recap, and then some tips maybe for people as to how to continue to offer your programs despite all the regulations.
Thank you so much for that question. So when we decide on the initiative that we are going to do at a school, or whether it's outside or wherever it may be, when our youth group comes together for this initiative, we first want to know that, do they actually understand what COVID is? Do they know why we are doing these regulations? Because we are dealing with youth, and sometimes they might not know, might not be in the same level of understanding as what we are. So we first have to tell them, this is the reason why we are doing these initiatives in open air spaces. This is why we are only a small group and not a larger group that we would normally use or participate with outside of COVID circumstances. So first seeing what the knowledge is about COVID-19 is, and then reiterating, okay, this is why we are social distancing. This is why we are in open air spaces. This is why we can't at the moment physically do games or with one another that involve interaction or touching one another, or so forth. So this way we are making sure that youth also understand the health implications of COVID-19 and how we can practice it safely. So I think additional tips would be the usual protocols, just making sure the students or the youth are sanitizing, having a mask on, maintaining that social distancing, because sometimes the youth get so excited that they forget that we can't touch each other, and then a slip of a hand comes and so forth. So I think there are various ways, and especially on the World Health Organization's website, they have a lot of guidelines, especially for different age groups, from babies to older adults, of how we can maintain the the protocols. So I think that would be a helpful guideline and website to have a look at as well. Because when we've done some of the initiatives, we've had a look at those protocols just to make sure that we are above board.
Thank you. Those are two very, super reference points, and we can also kind of share those, what you said in the chat. The last, I'm going to go to Tanya. We've got 3 minutes. So Tanya, if you can just offer any final insights. I know for you, it's a lot about, you did say that people have to do kind of a lot of their movement at an individual basis, but what are some tips that you would give to people to continue, to keep moving despite the different regulations, and to, keep being physically active? What would you say are some tips for some of the young people out there, and also people who are doing different projects?
I would say that, because in schools, or even for kids itself, for children at least in Malaysia, that most of our education has shifted to become online education. So most of the youth have access to internet, and definitely staying connected is one of the important things for health, for mental health, and also for their social connection with each other, with their friends. So I would say that not just for the kids, but I would say parents, the role of parents are very important to actually encourage their children to stay connected with their friends, or even join some of the school programs that they have for physical activity, because I know that there are many schools and also many other online programs that offers this physical activity. And the other thing would be the parents themselves can actually promote it, right? Encourage their kids in terms of doing certain types of physical activity. And youth themselves can also initiate it, because I think they are capable of doing it. We have some schools that organize their own competition among each other on who can, lead certain activities every week. And I think that's great, because, in this, I guess during the pandemic, during the lockdown, we don't see each other physically, but at least they stay connected virtually and also stay active. So, these are just some of the easy tips, I would say, from me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And good. I was just going to say, I'm handing it over to Ben now.
No, thanks, Marissa, and thanks everyone. I realize we're running out of time, so we'll just wrap up quickly. I think it's really important insights we've gained from our 3 panelists today. Thank you so much to Tanya, thank you to Jack, and thank you to Chante for sharing genuine insights into how young people can continue to lead and reshape sport and development moving forward. We often refer to young people as the future, but young people aren't only the future. Young people are the present as well, and young people have a role to play right now in sport for development and many other aspects of our society. Thank you very much to everyone for your active engagement. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but thanks to all the audience for their active engagement and for being involved. Thank you very much to Saurabh and the Commonwealth Secretariat for joining us and organizing this important webinar. As our speakers said, the voices of young people are critical and need to be heard more than ever right now. So thank you so much for joining. For more information on the International Youth Day activities, including our call for articles, please visit sportanddev.org. We'll also share the recording of this webinar and a summary article on the contributions received from our community. All the panelists, I think, have or will share links to their organizations in the chat box, so feel free to contact them. So once again, thank you so much on behalf of Sport and Dev for being with us today, for joining this invigorating discussion. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day and evening. And as a final goodbye, we'd encourage everybody, if they're comfortable, to turn on their cameras so we can do a final group photo before wishing you all the best for the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow. All these faces popping up. This is so cool. Okay. I'm going to administer this as best as I can. So I will say, everybody that's got their video on, I will include you in the screenshot, okay? So 1, 2, 3. One more. 2 seconds. And thank you for the thumbs up. And 1, 2, 3. Cool. All right. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest
Thank you,
of your day.
everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Very interesting as always. Thank you for the spot.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.